This is Ken Smith reminding you it happened today, September 18th. But the year was 1502. Christopher Columbus lands at Costa Rica on his fourth and final voyage, 1502. Fort Ticonderoga on Lake Champlain in New York opened on this day, 1755. It was on this day that the first loan was made to pay the salaries of who? The President and the Congress of the United States, 1789. It was on this day that George Washington laid the cornerstone for the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., 1793. It was on this day, as soon as Napoleon and his grand army entered Moscow, the city erupted in flames. Two-thirds of Moscow would be burned to the ground. The invasion lasted 6 months. Napoleon lost 300,000 men. Russia lost 200,000 men. 1812. It was on this day Charles Louis Tiffany and his partner John Young co-founded a stationery and fancy goods emporium in New York City. Later, it would be renamed Tiffany and Company, 1837. It was on this day that the New York Times began publication. Cost of a newspaper, 2 cents a copy, 1851. It was on this day that 1,000 whites walk out of the schools in Gary, Indiana, a protest over integration, 1945. It was on this day the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, came into existence, established by President Harry Truman, 1947. On the same day, the U.S. Department of Defense began its first day of operation, 1947. On the same day, the U.S. Air Force was created as a separate military service, 1947. A strange television event. Tiny Tim and Miss Vicky get engaged, later to be married, by Johnny Carson on the Johnny Carson Show, 1969. It was on this day the funeral of Mao Zedong takes place in Beijing, 1976. A 500-pound, 6-foot-tall Hershey Kiss was displayed on this day in Times Square, New York City, 1990. On this day, Ted Turner gave $1 billion to the United Nations, creating a public charity, the United Nations Foundation, 1997. The first mailing of anthrax was found at a letter in Trenton, New Jersey on this day, 2001. After 72 years of the soap opera The Guiding Light, it ended on this day, 2009. It was on this day that Scotland voted to remain a member of the United Kingdom, 2000. 14. It was on this day China announced a new $60 billion tariffs on U.S. imports, a day after the United States imposed a $200 billion tariff on Chinese goods. And so, as we look on this day in the past, there's good news, bad news, confusing news. And as we look on this day today, we see that Dave and Buster's restaurant chain reported an 87% drop in sales, while pizza delivery has risen drastically. It spurred Papa John's to agree to open 49 new locations over the next 8 years. In New York City, the department store chain Century 21 is declaring bankruptcy and plans to close all of its 13 stores. And so there's good news and bad news, confusing news. But behind it all is the good news that this is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it. This is Ken Smith reminding you it happened today, September 18th.